remember that certainly over the last 30 years, lots of people have been talking about bombing Iran. And I remember when I was on active duty listening to John McCain sort of repeat this old song about Baba Baran, Barbaran, and then he would say bomb, 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 bomb Iran. This has been going on forever. And the neocon globalist cabal has been trying desperately to bring a war on with Iran. Now, remember that what stood between war with Iran and reason, rationality, and peace the last time around in 2019 was Donald Trump. He said no. And what had happened was a global hawk had flown right along the edge of what we call the Air Defense Identification Zone, ADIZ. And that was deliberate by the CENTCOM commander, then General McKenzie, and he was working with John Bolton and Secretary of State Pompeo, and they all thought this was brilliant because they knew that it was better than a 50% chance that the Iranians would shoot down this global hawk, which, by the way, under international law, if you fly into the or on the edge of the air defense identification zone of any country and you don't alert that country that you're doing so with a military aircraft, then they have the right to shoot it down. And it specifically talks about in law intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, which is exactly what the global hawk is about. So the Iranians watched and watched and watched, and finally they said, well, I guess we shoot it down, and they did. Well, this was greeted with tremendous joy inside the Beltway, especially by the usual suspects. Oh, this is great. Now we have what we need. We can attack Iran. I mean, you've listened to General Keane on television. He's another one. All of these people are profiting from this. In other words, they're part of a cabal that rewards its supporters handsomely financially. And what they all said was, now we have what we need and let's go to war. And they brought the vans with all sorts of expensive technology over to the White House so that you could turn the White House into an immediate sort of war headquarters. They all descended upon President Trump in the Oval Office, and he asked a couple of important questions. One of the questions was, how many people are we going to kill if we do what you want? Because they already had the strike package with aircraft and missiles ready to go. And the answer was, well, perhaps 300, maybe 500. And he said, how many people did we lose as a result of global hawk? I said, well, it's unmanned, nobody. Then he said, well, after the strikes go in, then what? Well, the answer is, well, we have a war. And why? What's the point? What do we gain from this? You know, and he said, no, thanks very much for all the information, appreciate it, but no, we are not going to respond to this with a massive strike package. So suddenly all all the big donors like Adelson and the others who have been pressing hard, we must have a war. This is good for the United States. This is good for Israel. Iran has to be destroyed. Everybody was sad-faced, unhappy face, and everybody sort of, oh, this is terrible, and walked away from the White House. Donald Trump saved us from a calamity. Well, we're back in the same position again. This time, the Houthis. Who are the Houthis? The Houthis are Shiite Arab tribesmen that have finally become the major force in this place called Yemen, down at the bottom of the Saudi Peninsula, the Arab Peninsula. But they've been fighting for many years, at least up until 2016, for their lives and their survival against the Saudis and, guess what? Al-Qaeda, because Saudi Arabia enlisted Al-Qaeda fighters to fight on the ground for them, while the Saudis and we bombed the Houthis. Why? Well, they're Shiites. And the Shiites didn't know what to do. They went to Iran and asked for help because they were the only people out there that would provide the Houthis with any assistance. They got it. And so obviously, they were at that point an arm of the Iranian octopus. And so eventually the war ended in a stalemate. The Houthis were actually the ones that prevailed. Even in the United States, the terrible famine that was brought on by all of this had killed tens of thousands of people. Finally, in Washington, people said, oh my God, this needs to stop. We told the Saudis no more, we won't support it. So it ended. Well, now the Houthis have decided that they are Arabs. So are the people that we call Hezbollah. They may be Shiites, but they're also Arabs. The so-called Shiite militias in Iraq that are all, quote unquote, Iranian backed, which is the effort to try and convey the impression that Iran controls everything these people do. they're Arabs. The people in Hamas who are being killed in great numbers are Arabs. We're up to what, 23,000 dead now. And so the Houthis have said, we are demonstrating our solidarity to our Arab brothers who are being murdered in Gaza. And until the efforts against them stop, we're going to make it miserable for commercial traffic through the Red Sea. Now, bear in mind, these are now much more sophisticated people than the ones they were a few years ago. They actually know who registers the ship, who's an owner or a part owner. And all of the ships that they've attacked, I think with maybe one exception, have had either real complete ownership or partial ownership by Israelis. And so they said, if you're a part owner or you own, because remember, the thing is flagged. It may be a Panamanian ship that flies some other flag, but it doesn't tell you who owns it, who's profiting from moving oil, liquefied natural gas, food, whatever. They've been able to find out. And it doesn't take much to stop commercial traffic. They don't have the newest and most lethal weaponry. They're using weaponry that's old, but it's still potentially lethal. And they've had some success in damaging ships. They haven't sunk anything. But if you're an insurer sitting in London, like Lloyd's, you're not going to insure any ships that go through the Red Sea until this is gone. And we have been pushed and pushed and pushed to, well, you've got to go down there and do something. I mean, the Israelis want us to do something because the Israelis can't use their port of Aqaba. They can't get through the Gulf of Aqaba or down where the port of Eilat is. They can't move anything up through the Suez Canal and then around in the Eastern Mediterranean to Israeli ports. So the Israelis said, you've got to do something. So after much gnashing of teeth and so forth, we did. Now, keep in mind that the Houthis were prepared and they were actually informed before the strikes went in. So I'm not sure we did much damage. And friends of mine who are on the inside that looked at the target set told me that we were hitting targets that we hit back in 2015 and 2014. In other words, these aren't new things that we haven't struck in the past. So I don't think it had much effect, but I think it probably made Mr. Netanyahu very happy, and it made people on the Hill happy because, in theory, this could lead to war with Iran, which is the real goal. We've got to go to war with Iran. Iran is the enemy. So I don't think it's had much impact on the Houthis. I don't think the Houthis are about to surrender and go away. I hope we don't try to land soldiers or Marines to chase them through the mountains down there. The terrain is terrible. It's a rotten place to fight anybody. The British were down there in Aden years ago in the 60s, and they finally said, to hell with this, and went home. I hope we don't bother with that. I wish we would talk to them and see whether or not we could come to some sort of arrangement. We know what their demand is, which is to stop what's happening in Gaza. We understand that, but maybe there's some room for discussion. We have this bad habit of sanctioning and bombing everyone who doesn't agree with us. It hasn't worked, and it's not going to work with the Houthis. But the real danger is we started this, and I apologize for the long diatribe. The real problem with this is it's really about Iran. And we don't understand that all of that oil infrastructure up and down the Persian Gulf and into Saudi Arabia, it's all very fragile. It wouldn't take much to damage any of it. And that has huge implications for us and for the world economically.
Yeah, well, it was